A well-known empirical study, published more than 60 years ago by Paul Aebersold, Radioisotopes New Keys to Knowledge, see link on the description, concluded that in a year approximately 98% of the atoms in us now will be replaced by other atoms that we take in our air, food, and drink. This study doesn't clarify for how long the last 2% can subsist on the human body and if a small part will stay on it until we die. The internet is full of texts on the issue, saying that all of our atoms are changed on a time frame of 5 to 10 years. But none of those articles quote any other scientific study. I couldn't find any study asserting a 100% change or its time frame, but I didn't exhaust the sources. The same can be said about books that claim a 100% change between 5 and 10 years, like Richard Dawkins, on his The God Delusion, who quotes Steve Grand, Creation, Life and How to Make It, who justifies this conclusion on more or less common sense. Indeed, if in only 1 year 98% of our atoms are changed, perhaps the percentage goes to 100% after some years more. But even a change of 98% has consequences about our identity. Saying that our atoms change doesn't mean that also our cells change entirely. Cells can repair themselves and discard molecules and atoms without dying. The best candidates to survive across our life are the neurons, even if we have other cells that survive more than 15 years, some cells of the muscles, especially the ones from the heart, and even of the gut. However, the classical theory stating that the body didn't create any new neurons after birth isn't the current state of the art. Even if the issue is still controversial, it seems now accepted that many neurons die daily, but that also neurons are created, especially on the hippocampus. If the number of neurons didn't augment since birth, we couldn't explain the increase on the dimensions of the brain as children grow up. But it seems that on the neocortex, the part of our brain associated with complex tasks, there isn't any creation of neurons. See studies quoted on the description. Therefore, all, or almost all, the atoms on our body change, but there are at least some neurons that aren't replaced during our life. However, even if the neurons of the neocortex are the same, it seems that these neurons also replaced all or almost all of their atoms. These neurons are also just clones of themselves, since they changed their material support, their atoms. Therefore, also all of our current body is mainly just a clone of the one we had some years ago. The I that made this video, on the atomic level, have little relation with the I from 2 or 3 years ago. If we don't have a specific material support, the idea that we are our body ends up in open crisis. Let's forget about any soul as a base to our identity for the reasons stated on my video about atheism. We can't also support an identity on our memories. An individual with amnesia doesn't cease to be the same individual, no matter how important memories are for our personal identity. Moreover, memories usually can't be trusted. Just watch again an old movie or read a second time an old book, rarely will it be exactly as you remember. Sometimes, the differences are staggering. If many of our neurons indeed are replaced, that seems to be clear on the hippocampus, but it is decisive mainly on the formation of new memories. Our memories might be memories of memories. Copies of previous memories. We can't also say that our identity is directly linked to our consciousness. We don't cease to be a specific individual because we are in a coma or in a sleep without dreams. So, what are we? Obviously, we are a specific DNA. No one has exactly your DNA, since not even identical twins have an exact copy of their DNA. It's the DNA's importance for our own individuality that makes cloning a so controversial issue. This means that we are mainly a specific pattern of organization, DNA, of any atoms. However, we are more than our DNA. Epigenome is a second code side by side with conventional DNA, and it's this additional code that determines if some genes are activated or deactivated. The way epigenome acts depends on our environment and lifestyle, including quality of alimentation, physical activity, stress, etc. Therefore, the epigenome creates a second level of individuality, even for identical twins. Moreover, many of our mental characteristics, including aspects of the personality and behavior, are not determined only by our neurons, but also by the connections neurons create between themselves. That is, the synapses. As far as is known, these synapses are determined also by our DNA, but as well as by our environment, the quality of our education, our habits, our personal experiences, etc. Children raised by animals aren't able to even use their hands. Probably, a neural exam would show very low synapses on many decisive zones of their brain. Therefore, another being that has a copy of our genes and even of our epigenome, won't clearly be us. He won't have the same synapses, since many are created by our specific experiences. Let's now accept that we are a specific pattern of organization of atoms, and all the changes caused on the way this pattern acts by our environment and personal experience by means of the epigenome and the creation of specific synapses. We are a pattern of organization and not a body or any specific material support. Now, think about what this conclusion implies to the theoretically possible upload of our mind to a machine. Upload and not download, since we are the sender. Of course, this is still impossible to do. But just follow me on the philosophical consequences of this on our identity. If we uploaded a copy of our neurons with all of their synapses to a machine, we would be uploading all of our memories, personality, and mental capacities to the machine, since all of this is formed or conserved on our neurons and their synapses. Would the machine become us? The machine would be an exact digital copy of us, a superclone, since it will be a copy not of only our DNA/epigenome, but also of all of our neurons and their synapses. But since we were the original from which he was copied and we were still here, he could be qualified as just that, a perfect copy. Of course, we would still be an autonomous individual from our artificial clone. Actually, our superclone would slowly become a different being from us, taking in account its future experiences. The simple realization that he was a copy from us would probably change him. It's an interesting question, wondering how he would feel about us. Cloning was banned with some justification. It's this conclusion that forces us to realize that any conversion from biological to digital form, with the destruction of our natural body, would determine our death. We would just be creating a perfect digital copy. We could say it would be us, but our specific consciousness would still be gone. But imagine that we weren't converted into any digital entity, but to a physical artificial person. A Homo artificialis. Our cells would be replaced by artificial cells, including our neurons and their synapses. One by one, our cells would be substituted by some kind of artificial cells. To make the process less dramatic, it could be a very slow one, lasting for years. As each of our cells stopped being able to divide and was converted to a senescent cell or die, it would be replaced by a brand new artificial one. We would end up doing what our body does at the atomic and cellular level, but with a change of our cell's physical nature. We would cease to be beings mainly of oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, and phosphorus, to be made of some other elements. During the time of the transformation, our natural body would be slowly killed, more or less as our own body slowly dies with the dead and replacement of almost all of its cells with new cells. But in the place of the old body we would have a new one, with an exact copy of our DNA and brain. In the end of this transformation, would the new body be us or a superclone, Just another perfect copy? Since we are already natural clones of our previous bodies, it seems it would be us as well as we are us now, compared with the body we had a few years ago. Taking in account the advances in artificial intelligence and the incapacity of our natural body to adapt, even with CRISPR or any other future genetic editing therapy, in order to keep pace with eventual future superintelligences, check my video on the subject. This probably is going to be our future. At least, if the human species wants to avoid obsolescence and probable extinction, as a useless and out-evolved species.